Greetings, my magnificent ones. Sue Paulson here, your magnificence mentor. Welcome to the Heaven on Earth series. Today I want to cover some ground regarding labels and the importance of using labels wisely. Now, let's face it, in our world, we label everything partly because we want to know what things are. So this is a book, that's a tree, these are rocks, this is a tomato, and on and on and on. And of course, when we're first learning language and able to express ourselves and ask, well, Mommy, what is that? Then, of course, a label is a very convenient way of identifying just exactly what that is. And it's sure a lot shorter than saying, well, this tomato, well, what is it? Well, it's a red, well, some people call it a vegetable, some call it a fruit. It's something you eat, and we could go on and on and on. So to shorten it, somebody at some point called it a tomato. I don't know who did that, but thank you for doing that. Now, when we think of labels, when we think of ourselves, labels I think can be really a challenge or a problem depending on what we use them for. So, for example, growing up in a family with three boys and me as the only girl, I eventually saw myself and gave myself the label of odd duck. It didn't seem as if I fit with my family. My brothers were engaged in things that boys do, and they were of kind of foreign territory to me. I wanted to be like them, but I learned very quickly that even though there were some things I could do as good or almost as good as them, and some things I could do even better than they could do, I was never going to be like them. And they didn't think the same as me. So I found it kind of odd. So I labeled myself the odd duck. Well, they're never going to understand me, and I can never really talk to them because they're different than I am. Well, I wasted a lot of years not having solid relationships with my brothers because I I saw myself as the odd one out. So that label didn't support me in a lot of ways. And in fact, in some cases, I took a perverse pride in that, oh, well, I'm the different one. I don't know that got me anywhere that I really wanted to go. So, and also a second example, for years, because of life circumstances and believing that life was doing it to me, the circumstances in my life, the people that did things to me, et cetera, all along the way, I gave myself the label of victim. Oh, well, nothing I can do about that. I poor me, I'm a victim, and it's not my fault. I didn't do anything to cause that. And you know the story, and maybe you've been there too. So, well, did that serve me? Not really. I mean, again, I might have taken some mm, perverse pleasure out of, oh, well, look at me, I'm a victim. But that wasn't really who I was, and that wasn't actually what was going on. So when I came to a point in my life that I learned that self-responsibility and that life was actually happening for me, not to me, that there were always going to be gifts, even in the most challenging of circumstances, then I worked to let go of that victim label and say, well, I might have a pity party and feel sad for myself and bad for myself, but it doesn't last very long, because I recognize that no, there's more going on than that. I think the challenge with labels, and particularly when we label someone else, it gives us, it's a judgment. First of all, we judge that's what they are, and in some ways that's all they are. So it's like we put them on this in this little box and say, oh well, that person's an idiot. And because we deem them so and we label them that way, it's easy to just discount them and put them on the shelf and say, oh well, I don't have to have anything to do with them because they're an idiot. Well, that's a difficult. If you're wanting to move into a magnificent life and you're wanting to experience more of your own magnificence, that won't do it. That won't do it, because of course the second that we point the finger at someone else and label them an idiot, then or stupid or mean, or all those other labels that might have a small grain of truth, okay, but that's not who they are. That's your perspective or your perception of who they are based on what they've done or not done or whatever. And we condemn the person along with their behavior. Well, that's not going to build in us any level of empathy, any level of compassion. And of course, if we don't have that compassion for other people, lots of times when we examine it a little more closely, we don't have it for ourselves either. So that whole way that I labeled myself and judged myself growing up spilled over into being quick to label, judge, and condemn other people. Well, that's such a conflict, and creates such conflict that it's hard to have a peaceful life. It's hard to go beyond those borders if we narrow ourselves down into that kind of a box. So today I want to encourage you to think about the labels that you use, particularly when you're triggered. I know when I'm triggered into behavior that's let me back up. When I'm triggered by someone else's behavior and a feeling arises in me that doesn't feel so good, my default to a certain extent still is, well, what's wrong with them? And I have a little rant inside my head. I may not say anything to them, but it's going on inside me, and these waves of resentment might be coming off of me because of what I felt was put upon me. So victim, right? Oh, it's their fault. They're to blame. They said this or they did that or whatever. When in fact, maybe from their perspective, what they did or what they said made perfect sense coming from wherever they were coming from. And if I didn't immediately label it, I might have an opportunity then to go into that scenario and say to them, whoa, wow, that hurt. Can you explain to me just like what's going on here? Because I sense there's some upset that you're feeling. Well, what's that all about in relation to me? And you may find that their lashing out didn't necessarily have anything to do with you, but it was a situation that got triggered and you happened to be in the line of fire, and they didn't know how to express it any differently, so it came out badly. Well, if I had $1 for every time I just blurted something out because I got triggered and I regretted it afterwards, wow, I would be probably one of the richest women on earth. So we do that, right? Because we're human, because we're having this human experience. Well, and actually we label ourselves human, and I don't know that that's totally accurate. I believe we are spiritual beings having a human experience, and in our human experience, certain things go awry, certain things go amiss. I suspect on the spiritual level, everything is perfectly fine and acceptable, and we don't make these missteps. But on the human level, we do, because experience is how we learn lots of the time. And if nobody clues us in based on what they've already learned, and or we don't listen or we don't get the lesson, then we stumble along, bumble along, mutter to ourselves about, I don't know how this is going to work out. So, well, welcome to planet Earth and welcome to being human. It doesn't have to be that way, because eventually, I know I certainly began to think differently about things. I was fortunate that I had some training in how to take responsibility for whatever the situation was in that moment and say, somehow I've played a part. Somehow this is my responsibility. Not that I'm at fault, not that I'm necessarily, quotes, wrong, but that there's something in here for me that can elevate me out of the pit of self-pity or anger or whatever it is that I felt because I allowed myself to get triggered. Then there's a gem there. And so it's important to look at it. We can only look at it if we're willing to expand our consciousness to embrace other possibilities. Well, maybe it's something from over here. Maybe there's a facet over there. What more is there for me to learn about what's going on right here, right now, in what I perceive? There's more. So it takes some courage to explore that, and it takes some determination. Every time I do it, I find that I benefit more and more and more. The other thing that happens is I find myself listening more and more and more, rather than jumping in with both feet with my opinion or my solution or blurting out why I think that's wrong or why I know I'm right or all of that. I listen more to make sure that I have thoroughly understood what was going on, even in the face of feeling fretful about what just happened. I take a step back and kind of track it through my brain and my heart to say, okay, what's really going on here? And then it's easier sometimes, not always, but sometimes it's easier to step out of that muck and say, oh, wow, I really needed to have a look at that again. Because let's face it, we keep getting tested on a variety of things in our lives, things that are not working that well, until we get it. And then we might face a final test just to make sure that we really got it. And then it doesn't come up anymore because we've dealt with it well, we've understood it, and then we've moved on from there. That's what I wanted to share with you today, talking about labels and labeling. I mean, obviously there are good uses for labels, and we do them in our world to be able to get along, to be able to accomplish things and move through our day. When it applies to people in our environment, I think we want to use, if we use labels at all, I think we want to use them wisely. So what if you just use the label of, you know, that person I just met, wow, they're a magnificent person. Well, how does that shift your understanding of who they are if you see that in them? Because it's there. They are magnificent, just as you are, just as I am. So it's to honor the magnificence in each one of them, despite them being scared or mad or quotes bad, or, you know, regardless of their behavior, the magnificence exists there. And when we tap into that, well, that's how we create a magnificent life. We start creating it for ourselves and we help others to create it. You know you're magnificent enough to do this. So test that out this week and run through the idea of labels and see where it might be holding you back or catching you up, so that you can resolve that and begin to move forward in a much more magnificent way. If you're enjoying the Heaven on Earth series, I really invite you to subscribe to my channel and also download my free app, The Magnificence Mentor. And I'm really excited to tell you that in November, I am going to be conducting the very first virtual 6-week program called Create Your Magnificent Life. It's very much a hands-on, how-to, experiential kind of workshop that I'm offering. You can, if you want more details on that, you can go to magnificencelab.org, and there'll be some information about that you can click on and find out more details. I'm in the polishing up stages of the workshop, so I'm very, very excited about it. So that's also a possibility for you. In the meantime, take the best care of you can, my magnificent ones, and have the most fun you can possibly have. Until next time.